Hey, well, good day, everybody. It's great to see you, and we're so glad you attended our panel this morning. And we're very privileged and honored to be on the main stage here today on the fourth Wednesday of the conference. And I'm going to guarantee you we're going to end this with a bang. And so we have a great panel of experts today that are going to share their experience and expertise in this area and this is our panel name, Below the Neck, Body and Wrist Worn Opportunities in the Enterprise. And you know what? That doesn't sound very sexy. That's because wearables don't seem to get the hype that AR and VR got, but they should, because they are so important. And in the next 45 minutes, we're definitely going to learn that. My name is Scott McCormick. I'm the CEO of Emergent Enterprise, which is twofold. First of all, I offer consulting to companies that use and implement these kinds of emergent technologies in their businesses. And then two, emergententerprise.com is a news website about these very kinds of technologies that we've learned about at EWTS. So head to emergent-enterprise.com and you'll see lots of great stories about wearables, IoT, AI, AR, VR, you name it. How are businesses using these incredible technologies? You will see it there. So I'm going to introduce you to each one of our panelists here today. And they're going to start with a very interesting question for me, and I think it will be for you as well. And that is, in these kinds of wearables, we've got smart watches, we've got smart glasses, we've got smart every kind of monitors. In your experience, what was the trigger that made you look into and adopt one of these technologies? So we're going to start with Manny Adams from the Cincinnati Airport, and he's going to get us going here today on the panel. So Manny, welcome to the panel and get us going.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody. Good morning to everybody. Again, my name is Manny Adams. I'm with the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. I'm the Senior Manager of Strategic Innovation here. And to go along with what Scott's question is what was our trigger that really, launched and really that launch pad to get us started in wearables was, there's a lot, but really the first one I think is leveraging technology that people were comfortable with to be able to curate a better experience for them, give them more efficiencies, gains, as well as understand how each person can leverage the smart wearable to do something differently. When I think about us real quick with the smartwatches that we've been able to utilize, people were already familiar with using smartwatches from Fitbits to the emerging technology a long time ago, and really just adding on to that functionality, but really giving us the view into the safety of our employees and making sure that they are, taken care of. That's, really was our first start with our triggers.
Yeah, very good. And I know in this area, the word safety is going to come up a lot because it's really found its place in helping our employees be safe in the workspace. Okay, Kaushal, with DPR construction, there's some incredible things happening in the construction industry in this area.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, and thank you, Manny. As you both mentioned, safety is one of our primary triggers for why we started looking into emerging technologies, more specifically wearables. So my name is Kaushal Diwan. I work for DPR Construction. I've been in the construction industry about 15 years, and in my current role for about the last 6. And all the variables, all the technologies that we've looked at, one of the primary focuses, how do we keep safe, our workers safe on job sites? How do we make sure that they go home the same way that they came into work, that morning? And so, that's kind of where, our trigger started, was really how do we create a safer environment for our workers, help them with productivity, be more efficient with their jobs, be less fatigue. So that's kind of that's where it started for me, Scott.
Yeah. So there's safety again. And I know in your world is something that's really primarily part of our next panelist's world, and that's the world of exoskeletons, which sounds very futuristic and sci-fi. But Julie, from Spirit Aerosystems, exoskeletons are a big part of your world.
They are, and I'm a technical fellow with Spirit Aerosystems and Human Factors and Ergonomics Technologies. It was really brought to us by our leadership, the exoskeleton, that science in itself. It's becoming so much more affordable that our leaders were very interested in having opportunities to put it on the floor, because there are some tasks that simply cannot be eliminated or modified, and you're going to have to do them with overhead work. We have an aging workforce. It's very important to keep people healthy. But the question was, which exoskeleton is the best one to use? And what environments should they be used in? And how do you deploy them? And those are answers that you don't necessarily get off of the website from the exoskeletons.
Okay, very good. And now we're going to move over to Kevin Harrup from Altria. Kevin, I know you're trying lots of different wearables and smart technologies. So introduce yourself and give us an idea what triggered something for you to launch one of these kinds of technologies.
Sure, Scott. My name's Kevin Harrup. I work at Altria and I lead our emerging technology COE. We started looking at wearables before the pandemic. We're always, part of our task is kind of to try to keep an eye on technologies that might solve a business problem we have right now, but also educating our folks on new tools that they might not be aware of that could solve problems that we thought we were handling okay. So because of that, we were always looking at wearables. But the COVID pandemic, like so many others, including my colleagues here on the panel, it really accelerated the need to evaluate that, scale it quickly in the same spirit of keeping our folks safe. So kind of all rules were off as far as, you know, the emotions that we had before about change and willing to try new things. COVID kind of put a hard reset to all of those things. So we really took a real hard look at wearables of how we could help mitigate the challenges of the pandemic. That was the trigger for us.
Yeah. The pandemic really did accelerate use of these kinds of technologies, or maybe instead of companies being nudged into these technologies, it just got pushed right into it. So that can be a good thing. Sometimes, I mean, not that a pandemic is a good thing, but you know what I mean, that something cataclysmic happens that really forces the company to make those hard decisions, because sometimes you can kind of be on the fence and have more meetings, have more POCs, and never really do anything. So that's something to be careful of. Okay, last but not least is Shaul, and we're going to go north because he is with Air Canada. Introduce yourself, Shaul, and then talk about one of the triggers that helped you adopt one of these technologies.
Sure. So thanks, Scott, and good morning to all the conference attendees. So my name is Shaul Shalev. I'm official title is Manager Analytics and Safety and IT Innovations for Air Canada. My eureka moment, like I like to call it, is really made out of two entities. The first one was the starter of all this, of all kind of the way that I think now. So my wife is doing her PhD. Part of her thesis work was on multiple intelligences theory by Howard Gardner. Basically, I'm going to dumb it down for my sake, not for you guys, absolutely not. So he basically talks about how different kids have different, stronger intelligences, that if you tap into those intelligences, they digest the material better. So either by introducing songs into the curriculum, introducing technology, introducing video playback and whatnot. And that started me thinking about what are we other than older kids. So I came to an understanding that I cannot present to all my VPs or all my clients, all the employees in Air Canada, the same flavor of dashboard, which is basically a two-dimensional entity. So one of the days that I was sitting in the Toronto airport, the Montreal airport, sorry, 5 a.m., I started noticing that a lot of our employees are doing a lot of these. So checking their watches, and I'm like, hey, you know what? This is a medium that I can use that multiple intelligences theory and just try to push actionable data to them. And then I started my whole process with wearables and augmented and mixed realities. So we're able to bring some really, really cool applications and features into the whole corporate safety world, which is very cool.
Okay. That does sound cool. And I'm actually going to go right back to you, and we're going to go backwards of what we just did on my next question, so you'll kind of know where you lie in this. But let's hear about, when I come to conferences, I like to hear about actual projects on the ground that are being used and that are being effective. And so you sort of alluded to one there, to getting notifications to watches, and we're all used to that. I would bet a very high percentage of the attendees right now are wearing a wearable, like maybe an Apple Watch like I am, or some other kind of monitor. So what that project you were alluding to, notifications to employees, what problem was that solving? Give us the real, briefly of course, but the real meat of what problem you were solving by using wearables with your workforce.
Absolutely. So my management team is obsessed with data, with pushing data to the right people at the right time.
That's everyone's management team.
Well, yeah, but mine actually back it up with a lot of time and efforts that they allow me to experiment with some crazy projects. One of the when I just joined the company with that, my say to my boss was, I'm going to fail 90% of the projects, guarantee. Spend your money for nothing, but the 10% are going to be game changing. And I'm happy to say that we are one of the first airlines that do this type of projects, this type of POCs. But if I'll go back to your question, so the need was, I cannot, well, my management team told me that they cannot expect a user to go in and stop their day job, go into the office, open a laptop, log into the portal, log into to the computer itself, log into the portal, look for a URL, click on it, and then look at the dashboard. It's a lot of steps that require him to really stop anything that he's doing and just look at that data. This is not 2021 way of work, or this shouldn't be working like this. So we have a very cool company that we've partnered with, Sisense. So they provide us the BI platform, and one of the features that they allow in that platform is sort of widgets that you can connect to and expose outside to the outside world. So the actual need was push the data to them. Make it simple, make it simple, make it streamlined, make it easy for them to access it. So the users with the POC that I built are able to choose a widget that interests them specifically. Let's say you're working below the wing, you want to know how many times a dolly fell off a conveyor belt or whatever it is. You can find that widget once in the dashboard, click on add or send, and then that widget now all of a sudden is alive at your smartwatch. So you do this and you see exactly the data that interests you.
That's great. Just-in-time information that's critical to your job. That's really key to these kind of things. Kevin, we're going backwards through the list. So what about you? What's an actual project that you're working on, and what's a problem that it solved?
Yeah, so we have several projects that we try to attack with wearables, one of which was, of course, social distancing and contact tracing. That's very much still a real thing right now. The more we could keep our folks safer, the more we can keep production going, keep them out of harm's way. So it's kind of a mutually beneficial value proposition. So we see a lot of our folks that are willingly able to adopt this technology and see the value that it provides. But Shaul was talking about a good point earlier, which is kind of the UX experience. Like, what is it like for these folks to wear these devices, whether they're on the wrist, whether they're on the head? I know we're focusing on the neck below. And we also have to think about the environment. So the project that I'm talking about now is something where we're leveraging a waist-worn, basically a beacon, but it's a technology called a trace tag. And it uses RF radio frequencies. And basically, if another wearer gets too close to you, say closer than 6 feet or whatever you set it as, it emits an audible alarm to let you know you need to step back to maintain your social distance. But what it also does, it also logs that activity to say, hey, that Kevin and Scott may have got too close at this particular time of the day for an extended period of time, let's say 20 minutes. If one of us were to get sick later on, it's a good way to go back to the other and say, hey, you might want to get tested, or let's keep you at home until we can make sure you're not going to further the spread and make sure you're safe yourself. Some of those factors we had to consider when we looked at the waist-worn technology versus a helmet-worn or a wrist-worn was our own factory environment. And Bluetooth is just a wonderful thing in a factory where it kind of ping-pongs off every machine in the factory. And some of our users, the operators, are they really going to charge their watch every day and bring it into work? Are they going to have something to pair it to? And then how do we get that data? Is it something that's limited by Google and Apple? So when you take all these factors and put it together, we tried to attack our POC is with the most versatility that we had control of, to see kind of where that went. And for that particular, pilot that we did, the POC, we saw a 70% reduction in close contacts of 6 feet or less at the conclusion of that 3-week pilot. So we shown that it could actually do what it was supposed to do, and we're still using it right now.
Wow, that's great metrics. That might be a question we have later, is what kind of metrics are you guys seeing in these types of technologies that have really said, yes, this was worth it? Okay, hey, so Julie, I want to go to you, and exoskeletons in your world is what kind of problems does it solve?
Well, the exoskeletons are looking at providing some sort of resistance and support for the upper arm while people work overhead. And I'm looking particularly at passive upper body exoskeletons. Our big push has been using our multidisciplinary team consisting of people from research and development, safety, and the biomedical engineering department at Wichita State to take a look and see what exoskeletons are actually helping and if there's any detriment to using them by looking at muscle activity from different areas of the body, those muscles that you use when you have your hands overhead. So the question isn't just which exoskeleton is the best one to use, but with those, are they actually doing what they say they're doing in reducing the amount of fatigue for the person? And can that be correlated with the muscle activity? Because people are great at telling you if they like something or not, but they're not great at telling you why as far as introspection goes. Because you can be wearing something and think, oh, this is great. I'm really, boy, this sucker just really supports my upper body, when I'm working, and I love it. But is there another area of your body that might be affected by it that isn't positive? If you're having to push down against that resistance, are you utilizing muscles that you wouldn't have used if you weren't wearing the exoskeleton? So there are just lots of questions. And we have, as a team, and I'm not the primary investigator on that team, by the way, I consult on it, but we have a multi-year project that we've been doing. And I think we found a lot of great information, and we've looked at 7 different exoskeletons, I believe, at this point.
Oh, wow. I'm amazed that there's 7 different companies out there making exoskeletons.
Scott, there are so many companies out there making them. And because they are becoming more affordable, leadership is trying to get them out there because they want to help the people. It's that simple. Safety is really important for Spirit Aerosystems.
All right, Kaushal, we're getting to you now. What was a trigger? You're delving into so many different things in my talks with you, but what was a trigger that strongly said, yes, we have to look into or even adopt this technology?
Scott, we talked about a couple of things. We talked about exoskeleton suits, as Julie had mentioned. We also talked about, IoT, similar use cases as Kevin had also mentioned, with looking at contact tracing, primarily on both those items. I'll start with IoT. Our use case was to try to understand, how many people do we have on our job site at any given time? What are the different trades? Where are they located? If somebody, slipped, tripped, or fell, and is somebody getting the help that they need? How do we get emergency services to them as quickly as possible? So IoT solutions, mainly badging solutions, it really helped us do that. During the pandemic, as Kevin had mentioned, it allowed us to look at interactions between badges, and we could say, hey, this person was too close, and then we can do a contact trace and figure out who else did they come in contact with during that day. So that's something we've looked at for the past few years. It's something we're looking to scale. In addition to human badging, we've also looked at asset and equipment tracking with those same badging type solutions, where you could see where the tool is located on job sites, but also, how much is that tool being actually used? So we're able to pull usage time for equipment to say if something's been actually being utilized, or is it just, sitting there, collecting waste or being charged. On the exoskeleton side, our interest in there was to look at, as Julie had mentioned, we have an aging workforce. So how do we keep them working? How do we make sure that they're going home, with less fatigue and have more energy to spend the rest of their day with, with their families? We've tried 3 different suits, not as much as Julie had mentioned, the 7. The one that I really want it does not exist, right? The Iron Man suit from Stark Industries. But I think, the challenge that we find with these suits, it's still pretty early. It's still, I think we're still probably a ways away from when we'll see that, being utilized in the industry. But our use cases were 1, overhead work, and then 2, when you're hunched over, when you're bent over, like, when you're tying rebar or something like that.
Sure.
From our studies, we found that these suits, they do help reduce fatigue. They do help reduce muscle strain. But the amount of time that it takes for you to put it on, any kind of productivity increases, kind of a wash where, you might take some time, to do something quicker, but the amount of time it takes to put the suit on, you've kind of lost, that benefit.
Right.
The other piece is, are you, as Julie had mentioned, from that constant muscle memory, are you building a new muscle that does not need to be built? And once you take that suit off, is it helping you or hurting you? That's something that we haven't, tested long enough to find out.
Okay, very good. And a point that you made that really strikes me is I've always thought of this category as monitoring humans, but you use the case where it monitors a tool, and that's really brilliant. I think if you can figure out a tool is being used efficiently or not, and maybe it's not even needed on the site, and then it's a waste. So that's incredible. Okay, Manny, I gotta believe that the Cincinnati airport is a leader in using these types of technologies, just in my conversations with you and how many different things you're doing. So what was a trigger or triggers that led you to adopt some of the things that you're using day in and day out in Cincinnati airport?
Yeah, so with our wearable technology, the first thing that we were trying to solve for in the first case that we really trialed was understanding our restroom usage and really asset management through the watch. We trialed the technology to have some IoT sensors basically tell us when a restroom needed to be cleaned. So understanding the thresholds when a restroom needed to be cleaned and then really communicating that to our employees. So our housekeepers are wearing the wearable watches and really having almost a checklist to go through of what they need to clean, how often they need to clean it, where they're at. So when we took that holistic look of understanding the restroom and using that as an asset and managing that asset, we were able to solve for that issue from utilizing some IoT, some wearable technology. It also freed their hands up, so they didn't have to, be carrying around a tablet or other items. They could get that information on their watch and then really reset that watch or reset that threshold count and move forward with their day. It also freed them to focus on other areas. When for housekeepers at our airport, they take very much pride in a clean restroom. That is the first interaction of a community is when they get off the airplane. It is the gateway to the community. They get off the airplane, first thing most people do is use the restroom. They've been, stuck in there, and it really gives them an inclination of what is this area really like. So that's the first thing, and what they're looking at to gauge what this area is going to be like. So cleanliness is very important to an airport. But they were done on schedules, right? So before technology, they would clean on a different schedule. So every, let's say, hour or whatever that timing would be, they'd have to go in and clean a restroom. Now we have data driving that decision and making choices for us to when we need to clean a restroom instead of being on a schedule. That freed them their time up to be more of an ambassador for the airport. I mean, one of the first people ask questions about are people with badges, and they're right there in front of everybody. Now they have that time to answer the question, to focus on them high touch points of areas they might need to clean, to give that sense of, hey, these people care about cleaning. It is very important to them. And it just gives passengers and lower their anxiety level of travel, right? So of understanding the cleanliness. So that was really the first one that we solved for. We have multiple ones that we're doing, but that's what I really, that was the first focus, and we put that into all of our restrooms here at the airport. So
wow. So is there even coordination with when like big flights come in? Because the first thing everybody does after they get off the flight is go to the bathroom, right? So that means when a big jet comes in and everybody comes off, and 15 minutes later, the bathrooms right next to that gate are probably really dirty. Is it all coordinated together?
it is very much so. So that understanding the flight plans for the day, understanding where we need to be, building the whole data and analytics to solve for staffing, right? So with staffing issues, the wearables really help to support that need and put people in places where their need is needed mostly. So very much so, very, very true.
That's really cool, and that gives us a little indication of how things like, and I know Shaul will speak to this in a little bit, about even things like artificial intelligence come into play in integration with these devices. But before we get there, I'm going to go back to Julian, and it has to do with, I'm always concerned with, because user experience is an important part of my world. End users, especially for something like an exoskeleton, boy, I gotta believe there's pushback to wanting to use I mean, you show it to somebody and they're like, I'm gonna wear that? Come on. I've been doing this job for 30 plus years and I know how to do it and do it right. And my next question to each of you is, how have you, with new technologies, how do you deal with pushback from the users to make it, to keep the relationship good, and also to share the value and make this a positive thing for those folks that are wary of using it? Julie, how do you do that?
Well, our ergonomics team has a really good relationship with the shop floor, and they have met with certain people that are considered champions within that area, because you're always going to find some people, whether they're the young bucks or that are just starting out, who don't think they need any help, or the people who've been there forever and they don't really want to change their ways. But in those groups, you're going to find certain people who are natural leaders, and if you can engage them, then you're going to have a good chance of being successful. Also, exoskeletons aren't really meant to be used in every area. So there are just pockets where they can be very useful. And in those areas, many times people are already just experiencing some sort of discomfort. If you have your hands and arms over your head all day long, you're going to be fatigued at the end of the day. So that if we can do something to help them to reduce that fatigue, then we are just definitely winning. But the last part of our research that we're doing has to do with shop trials and field testing, bringing real people in, having them do real jobs, and then expressing how they felt about it. And because we listen to them, whether it's positive or negative, and we react to what they say, I think we get a better acceptance rate among our population.
Listening. Hey, good point. That works in all relationships, I'm pretty sure. Kaushal, in the construction industry, I'm going to kind of stereotype your users here, and guys and girls that are kind of fiercely independent and sort of lunch bucket, work hard every day kind of people. And when you bring in this fancy new technology, maybe I don't want to use that. Is that true? Or how do you deal with pushback from your end users?
I think, Scott, it starts with education. We engage early. We share with them what is the technology, what is it used for, what is it not used for. I think the biggest thing that helps us kind of get over that initial pushback is to help them understand, what is this subtracting from your daily life. If you adopt this tool, this technology, what is it that you're adding? But more importantly, how much are you subtracting? Because if it's a constant add, and we're adding more to their workload, then it's always going to be, dealt with some sort of resistance or hesitation, right? So that's the biggest thing. It's education of what is something used for, why is it used, and how is this going to help them, in their daily lives. It really boils down to like sort of that what's in it for me type of, mentality.
Yeah.
And to Julie's point, I think I've seen kind of both sides. I think the younger generation is more, open to it because they have grown up with technology. The older generation, for them, it's more of how do I extend my, my work life? How do I find a way to, to do this without feeling less fatigue at the end of the day? So, different use cases and ways to approach it.
Yeah, and I think what's in it for me is a legitimate question from our end users. You should be able to explain the value very clearly and quickly to somebody why you're implementing whatever technology it is.
I will say my lunchbox is now digital now with Uber Eats, so I don't really have to take that anymore.
Yeah. Kevin, I got to imagine you have a wide range of end users and all the stuff that you're doing. And how do you deal with pushback in this area?
Yeah, I really want to bounce off what Julie and Kaushal were talking about, which was empathy, to try to understand where these folks are coming from. So we've tried to have as best of open communication with our factory workers as we can. They're the ones who pay the bills. They know their stuff. I mean, I'm not going to go out there and teach them to do something they've been doing for so long, but maybe I can help them solve a friction that they've had for a while that they could use some help for. So one of the reasons that we were able to adopt some of the COVID mitigating technologies, even though it was so polarized from the outside in, we realized the emotion a lot of times, surrounding contact tracing and temperature scanning and social distancing was coming from the outside and had nothing to do with Altria. It was in the news. It was everybody had their own opinions and they're talking about it next to the water coolers. So we tried to have a lot of empathy towards the folks and respect that everybody was learning as we kind of went along. But at the end of the day, it's having a relationship with those end users and communicating and over communicating and updating and always trying to bring them on board. And then you kind of let the buzz take care of itself. If you try to grab a bunch of guys and girls and put them in a headlock and say, you're going to do this and it's going to be awesome, it's not a real good formula for success. You want to really establish that trust. And you got to earn it every day, So these folks, they have a job to do. They have to keep us up and running. And if something breaks, we have to be willing to respond and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's more about the empathy and the relationship. I'll echo what Kaushal and Julie were saying.
Okay. So no headlocks, right?
No headlocks.
Okay, got to remember that one. Then Shaul, so you're asking everybody to have this smartwatch on their wrist and look at it all the time. I got to imagine there's some pushback to that.
So yes, there is, or there might be at least, but like my esteemed colleagues here mentioned, it's all about communication, empathy, and education, right? If you have all those ingredients into your secret sauce, breaking that barrier becomes much, much easier. On top of that, as I mentioned, our leadership is obsessed with data, obsessed with pushing data, and they're also obsessed with privacy. In a sense of we have a policy in the company where non-punitive measurements, we will not take any punitive measurements against anyone who reports willingly on incidents that happened or near misses or whatever it is. This really fosters trust within the organization itself as a whole. So no one is afraid to talk about something that happened or something that might have happened or an idea that he has, because he knows that nothing will happen to him from a work perspective, from his manager, from his peers, at any phase of his day, work, week, month, or year. So this really encourages my users to submit data. And to be honest with you, without data, I have nothing to work with. The other angle I'm trying to push here is like, I'm mentioning, instead of, going to the office, logging in, doing all that process, which is, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you do this, you see the stats, you decide what you do. Yeah, then you have a time to go grab a coffee. right? So there is a lot of augmentation that I am able to bring to your work process, which is beneficial for you, because all of a sudden now, instead of spending 20 minutes here, you do it 30 seconds here, and then new possibilities open up. You can do either more work, or you can go grab that very important coffee, very important coffee in the airport area. So this is really the two-pronged approach that we have: non-punitive policy within the company itself, and augmenting your abilities and capabilities, much like an exoskeleton, but in a pure software way.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so Manny, this is a hard question to be last on, but I'm going to ask you to focus on something here, and that is, just like Shaul was saying, you're following people around on their job, and to me that kind of feels like somebody looking over my shoulder all the time to do my job. Is personal security and personal data, is that a concern when people are pushing back to these kinds of technologies?
Yeah, so agree with everybody on the other question. I wanted to say that the other part was with data is understanding where the data lives, I think is really important, and making sure that the people that are wearing the watches are comfortable with understanding that data. At an airport, it's a little different. We have cameras everywhere, as you can imagine. So privacy is really out the window for our people, but just because there's so much camera access. But we want them to feel comfortable and understand that this data is very important to us. We take that very serious, the cybersecurity aspect of that, of understanding the privacy of a person. But there's a way, right? There's a give and take of understanding the difference between privacy and HIPAA and versus safety of your employee. So I think that's a part that they have to weigh out and understand from both sides where we stand and why we're doing this, and really communicating that information out. The other part for us is really having the employee themselves be a part of that, is giving us feedback of what's happening. That's really important to us. We've made changes to our program based on suggestions from our employees, and that's been really key for us to be successful, and really having them buy in. And the other part, and the final thing I want to say, is really when you take a housekeeper and you are throwing technology onto their body in whatever way it is, it almost changes what that employee is viewed as, right? So more of upscaling, some type of upskilling for that employee to be successful, and really take them their job of not just being a housekeeper, but really a person that utilizes technology to do their job. So it's a lot different way of looking of someone just cleaning a restroom or taking care of an area, but really they're utilizing technology to do their job now, and really changing and upskilling them for their future growth. I mean, we've taken housekeepers from our staff, and now have rolled up into our cybersecurity department. So really have changed that, and that is a successful story of taking technology and really growing, and upskilling an employee. So
I love it. That's an excellent example. Okay, panel. Man, I can't believe this, but we're almost already done. This went so fast, and I really appreciate some of your answers. But before we go, I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to sort of send our attendees off before we have our Q&A that might get into more detail on different things. What are just some words of inspiration or encouragement, or just making me motivated to go and use some of these technologies in my own world, at my own business, at my own company? So we're going to go with our first order that we did at the start of the panel, and that means going right back to Manny. When a running back has a good run, you give the ball right back to him. So that's what I'm doing here. Manny, what are those words of inspiration that you have for our attendees today?
Yeah, so I would think of this when we think of words of wisdom. Find them small wins, look for the low-hanging fruit to tackle, and you leverage the technology. Before, I think people were scared a lot to dive into it, just understanding, because it was so new. But I think people are more and more comfortable in adopting wearable technology to be used in the workplace. When you think of safety, and you think of for us, we have like a lot of lone workers that are by themselves. It gives them confidence that someone's still watching them, looking out for them, and caring about them. So I think that is a small for us is just understanding the business problem and understanding the low-hanging fruit of where we can leverage technology to solve that issue, I think is really a key to start your journey down the wearable technology. And then finding really good partners, from GuardHat to TaskWatcher that we've used at our airport. But there's really good organizations out there that can supply and help you with that journey, or even reach out to us. I mean, we are good people to reach out to help you get started. Definitely ask us questions. We'd be more than happy to help.
Okay, yeah, and they'll have the opportunity in the Q&A session that's just about to come up. So that's a good point. Kaushal, how about you? Words of wisdom.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I'm going to piggyback and just kind of build on what Manny had said. Any kind of technology, any kind of solution, right? It has a vision to solve a specific problem, and it's really hard to know if that's a problem that you have or that's something that you just, might actually come across later on. And so my inspiration, my feedback here would be just be curious, right? Just be curious and think, look at things, learn from things, right? As leaders, I would say, create that environment so your people are free to experiment and try new things. I think this is kind of where innovation happens. This is where, sometimes you might come across something that might change your life, right? And so for me, it's, be curious, but at the same time, also create an environment where your people can try and experiment.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you know what, Julie, I think you've spent most of your professional career being curious from what I know of your background. So what are some words of inspiration that you would have?
I think that probably the most important thing is to really engage those end users, the people who are going to be using whatever technologies you're looking at. We were very fortunate in that we've been able to use them actually in the laboratory to do the testing itself, and then also on the field. And because we ask for their opinion and they know that that's important to us and that they are vital in the success or failure of whatever it is that we're trying to launch, I think we get a much better acceptance rate from our population.
Excellent. Well, it's always valuable to me when I know that I'm being listened to. So yeah, that's a good point. Kevin, what are some words that you can send our attendees off with that really encourage them to try some of these technologies?
Like, get up and do it. I mean, wait till the end of this conference before you do it, but get out your chair and go do it. You got to kind of walk the walk to really put yourself in the shoes of the users that you're going to impact. I've had smart rings, smart watches, every AR, VR headset. I mean, I look like a cyborg walking down the street. But you got to think about that as an opportunity. Our folks are already stuffing stuff in their ears. So why don't we have Bluetooth? You're already protecting your eyes. How come there's not a heads-up display or mixed reality feeding into that? If I'm wearing anything, how come I'm not taking my temperature? Why am I spending millions of dollars on cameras? So there's all these opportunities that you could go out there and just experiment. I told you before, Scott, I was in this very backyard before with a push lawnmower with an iPad on top on a Teams call, trying to replicate a certain decibel level of the factory, trying to solve things at home, saying, hey, this one's pretty good, this one not so much, So tap into your own creativity, look at all these opportunities for what they are. They're opportunities.
I love that story about the lawnmower, and it is very creative. So there might be something in your garage right now that can help you out test something of this technology. Shaul, you get the last word. Well, I get the last word actually, but as far as words of inspiration go, what would you say to our attendees that they could take back with them to get started in their own company with these kind of wearables?
So I've started with my wife. I'm going to finish with my wife. Really, what started the whole thing is about thinking about your users. What do they want to see, right? The data is the same data. A dashboard is a dashboard, two-dimensional screen that you see, but not everybody like to digest that the same way, right? So find what your users are looking for. Find what their strongest intelligence is. Push to that direction. That's one thing. Second thing, I'm blessed to have the background in software development, so I could go in and build those very ugly POCs that that go through an evolution of getting to a nice product. I'll actually try to drop maybe two links to a few LinkedIn posts that I've done where it shows that evolution. So like everybody said, don't be shy. Go find your Shauls that are able to build something quick and dirty, and find those A players, your management, your peers that are willing to allow you to experiment and fail. Failing is happening a lot, but once you hit home run, oh boy.
All right, man, those are great words to send us off on. But we're really not sending people off, because we're going to make ourselves available for Q&A, and maybe you can find out what actual softwares and hardwares our panelists are using, questions like that. So attendees, don't hesitate to dive right into the Q&A, and I know these panelists will be more than happy to share their expertise with you. I want to thank all the panelists for your great expertise. I would have loved to talk even longer. And then also for Brain Exchange and the conference for the great job that you're doing staging this whole conference. We, again, are really privileged and honored to be on the main stage today. And we hope all of you attendees, we thank you for coming, and we sincerely hope you got great benefits from the things that we had to share. So thanks so much for coming, and have a great day.